love doing drive-thrus. And it was right out of the gate. And it mostly was probably the Starbucks account that really kind of turned my love on for drive-thrus the most there.
That's Chris Hatch, the Drive-Thru guy. His company is one of the leading developers of fast food restaurants around the country. While not our typical guest profile, in this episode we discuss all things drive-thrus, including the rising world of drive-thru coffee and dirty soda, and how you can maximize your site selection as a franchisee.
The U.S. consumer in coffee has gone to a drive-thru only model, and they're accepting it. And in the meantime, we are watching Starbucks at scale fail on the cafe model. Almost every one of these operators has the same Chick-fil-A style mentality of hospitality. It's almost like they're serving the hospitality first, and then the coffee is just an energy drinks or an afterthought.
Our audience, obviously, and most people understand what it means to own a franchise, but you specialize in owning the dirt beneath the franchises. So can you just, in simple terms, explain what you do and how it makes money for you?
Yeah, you bet. So a lot of our customers are really, really incredible operators. And I think that's what you're alluding to with your audience being full franchisees. There's so many amazing operators out there. And what's so remarkably different in the world is translating being a good operator to getting the next great location open. And so what our team does is we fill the gap, right? So we like to marry where good operators can exist, and then where can we help you open your next, 1 to 500 locations. So that's what we do. We help you find those sites. And then once we've helped you select those sites, and we figure out how we get your mousetrap built and dialed in as efficiently as we can get it for you.
So traditionally, are you going to these brands? I know you do a lot of work with Dutch Bros, but I think you've done work with Raising Cane's and Pizza Hut and Burger King and tons of different brands. Are you going to them and saying, hey, I have a site, connect me with a franchisee who might be a good fit, or is it vice versa?
It goes both ways. Maybe a way to start to answer that question is, in any given day, I probably speak to 10 to 20 restaurant operators every day of my working days. And so, I talk to a lot of different operators. I know where a lot of different people have needs. I know it might be a Wendy's operator in this trade area. It might be a Dutch Bros operator here or 7 Brew operator there. I generally can kind of know what's going on with the trend of what that individual, either franchise group or the corporate real estate rep inside of, a larger company is looking for in the trade area. And so it's a lot of that dialogue. And then the other thing is, which has kind of been interesting, where it's this whole dirt dog thing is kind of taken on a life of itself over the last year here. It's been amazing. It's been way fun. And so now what happens is, like, anywhere from 5 to 25 times a day, the email dirtdogs@forzacommercial.com pings, and here's a new site. And it's, when I tell you any town USA, we see stuff in Maine. We've had sites submitted for all 50 states in the last 12 months. Easy. And so it's caused Alex and I to have to really harness in our geography, trying to match what every retailer's ever talked to either one of us about as far as expansion goes. And I'm sure we're missing a bunch of them, but some of them are easier. Like a site came in yesterday, and it was just such a no-brainer coffee site. And we just knew exactly who needed to be there. We knew who to call. And it was easy. It's just pick up the phone. Would you like to be here? Yes. Great. Perfect. Here are the rough metrics. This is what it looks like. Perfect. Sounds good. We should be able to do that in sales, and we should be able to afford that rent. Perfect. Sounds good.
So there's naturally, depending on the brand, different specifications that they're looking for. And because you've done so much, at least just based off your social media, you do so much work with Dutch Bros. That was going to be one of my questions is, why are they getting maybe, I don't want to say preferential treatment, but you're clearly doing a lot of work with them and they're growing really fast. So maybe that's also just part of it. But yeah, I was going to ask you what kind of makes you end up working with one tenant over the other, but it sounds like it's just based on the match of your site with what the concept actually needs.
A lot of people who are trying to become retail developers will ask me, how do you get in with X tenant? Well, the answer is easy. You just go find the site that they have to have. And once you have the site that they have to have, you get yourself in and you just do your job and do it well and be nice and courteous and treat them like a good customer. And lo and behold, you might get site 2 and then site 3, and it just keeps going. And so at this point in time, we've really gotten in quite well with the folks at Dutch Bros, throughout their system. We know many of the people. I mean, I'm talking even sales coaches and regional managers and people that normally we wouldn't really spend that much time with. But once you've built a handful of stores for somebody, you just tend to just keep working your way in. And so it's easy now to see what works for them. And customers that we wish we could do more of, I've done 1 in and out, right? I would love to do 100 in and outs. Okay. But there it's been a little bit harder, and mostly just because in and out, they don't really need me, right? They would prefer to own their own real estate. And so if I'm going to go do deal 2, I have to go find a second site that they need, right? So it's a little harder there.
For you, aside from maybe, let's just be honest, just cool to say that you're working with in and out. But does it really matter to you whether it's an In-N-Out or a Dutch Bros or a Cane's or a Starbucks, right? As long as the tenant stays in business so that they can pay their rent to you, isn't that at the end of the day all that matters, or am I missing something there?
No, the base premise is what you're saying, right? Is you want that, you need these tenants to be top of class, right? They need to perform well. We are looking at a number of locations right now that are in the state of Washington and the state of California, where you have traditional fast food operators that are doing, $1.3 to $1.8 million. And some of these at 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, some of these franchisees might be actually beating the national average in volume. But we're watching these restaurants close. And the reason they're closing is because of the minimum wage issues causing so much havoc to their system that they can't remain profitable, even though they might be in the top 25% of system sales. And so you have to look at the vibrancy of the brand. You got to look at the vibrancy of the operator. And then it's also, they've got to have a good manager in the store. And what I mean by that is we've owned a lot of Arby's in my family over time, right? And my grandfather started building for Arby's in the 70s. And a lot of our stores we've had for 40 years, 50 years, 20 years. And what's been interesting is you'll watch, and it will be a corporate lease signature, but a manager will come in and really kick butt and just do an amazing job. And then they'll do the appropriate thing. They'll promote that manager to some higher role. And then you get a new manager that comes in, and all of a sudden they might drop sales 20% year over year. And here was a perfectly good location, perfectly viable spot, but now you're at risk of corporate potentially closing the store because they put a bad manager in there. That happens all the time.
Yeah, it's such a critical hire for a franchisee, and there's definitely like key man risk there, I think, for any operator. You said something earlier that I want to key in on, which is people ask you, how do they get into this retail leasing game? And your answer is find a site, because that makes sense to me, right? Like if you own a killer location, there's going to be a lot of brands who are like, I want to build a location there, so I'll do business with you. But my question is like, how do you get into this world? So maybe a good way of attacking that question is zooming out on Chris Hatch. How did you get started in this business?
So I got into the business while I was in college in 2002 and started as a retail tenant rep broker. And so my job was representing companies like Wendy's and Dollar Tree and Starbucks. And my job was T-Mobile, a handful of others. But my job was to help them expand and open new stores. And right out of the gate, I figured out, just for whatever reason, and it's just weird lifelong passion, that I love doing drive-thrus. And it was literally, it was right out of the gate. And it mostly was probably the Starbucks account that really kind of turned my love on for drive-thrus the most there. I think they had like 15 or 16 stores open in the state of Utah when I got that account for Utah. And then we went on to open 35 or 6 locations over 3 years. And we did a handful of non-drive-thrus during that time period. All of those non-drive-thrus closed almost within 5 to 10 years, every single one of them. And the drive-thrus are the ones that remained open. And just kind of an interesting thing is just the drive-thrus just did so much better. And so if you spend an exorbitant amount of time with a whole bunch of restaurant operators and you ride around in a car with them and you hear how they think, you hear about the problems that they're dealing with in life, you hear about, to your point, a bad management hire or store manager hire, you hear about they switched to this insurance company because they saved X. You know, you just hear all these things when you drive with operators all day long every day, and you instantly can kind of assess who's a good operator pretty quick. And then you see this interaction that exists between a franchisee and corporate, which is really fascinating to watch that, right? And it's kind of funny as a broker, you're kind of in between the two, right? Because corporate's trying to drive the growth and the franchisees trying to only open profitable stores. And so they're a little more hesitant to say yes. And so it's just like a weird dynamic, right? But having spent all those years in the car with different retailers, it's just helped me understand that. So I did that. We still own a brokerage firm, and we represent a lot of retailers that expand. And so we are still in that business today, right now in 2025. And so 23 years and running. In 2008, I wanted to switch slightly, and so I moved over to net lease sales. And so I thought, let me sell that drive-through product that I really like. And so I kind of spent that time period of '08 to 10 before, as we started climbing out of the GFC in 2010, and we started getting a lot of sales done. And some of those years we were doing 50 to 75 sales a year, which was really exciting and fun. And it's interesting to see who buys that product and why they buy it and how they look at it from a value standpoint. And so we continue to do that. We still have an investment division here at our brokerage. They still help people buy and sell real estate all the time, but definitely with a heavy focus in the fast food drive-through space. And so when I flipped over in 2020 and created a ground-up development team, it was just kind of a natural evolution, I think.
Yeah, could we talk about that? Because to me, it is totally two separate businesses. One is where you're buying the real estate, right? And then the other is a construction business, for lack of a better way to explain it. I mean, it's very different skill sets required, no? But I feel like it's common in this world where people who own the land are also going to offer the service to do the actual construction of the buildings for the tenant as well.
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand, just because if you look at the trend over the last 25 years, you're seeing most people, whether it's a franchisee or whether it's corporate, you're seeing less people house development and construction people in-house. And so more of this has become kind of a third-party offering, third-party service, right? And so I think there's more need. I also think most of my peers, right, that are in the development space, most of them were much smarter than me, and they've gone to extremely lucrative development worlds like multifamily or industrial. And a lot of my friends have very beautiful jets. They've got houses in Hawaii and everywhere else. It's a very nice, glamorous lifestyle.
Yeah.
And retail is just not that, right? I mean, I enjoy riding in Delta at 29B in between two sweaty dudes coming back from Atlanta on a red eye. That's just... But I'm sick and twisted like that, right? I mean, that works for me, right? So I've always chosen that path in retail. And so there are less of me, like when I walk around the, ICSC, the International Council of Shopping Centers show in Vegas, there are less people like me each year than there were the year before. And we're just you're not seeing a whole bunch of people flock to retail development by any means.
What am I missing? Because it sounds like a great business. You buy land and you lease it to arguably the most stable retail brands in the world, effectively. I've been around the block enough to know that there's always a catch. But why wouldn't this be incredibly competitive and people trying to do it all across the country? Because it seems like such a no-brainer.
I think, there's not a ton of drawbacks, but there are a few, right? I mean, one is the equation is way harder today for restaurant operators to make a store function and make money.
Oh, yeah.
That causes their equation with us to be more constrained, which is if you're developing and you're not paying attention to how your operators are doing, you're just very foolish. You don't have a long-term perspective if that's what your perspective is. Everybody needs to make money. The operator needs to make money. I need to make money. We all do. And so my spread is tighter because materials continue to be high.
Yeah.
Labor continues to be out of control. And then on
Food
top
costs,
of that,
food costs, right? Like burgers are at all-time highs because of the cattle shortage. Yep. And There's a lot of
Yeah.
things going on.
And then all of us are using debt in some form or fashion. And so all of us have an interest carry, and our interest carries are higher than they have been. And then I'm building to a back end exit value always. Even if I choose to hold the asset, I still need an end value. And my end value is inflated from where it was 2 years ago before we started raising interest rates so quickly, so rapidly. And so everybody's equation is really stressed. So that part causes it. And this is where I relate single tenant retail development is like hitting singles and doubles in baseball. You're not going to hit triple. You're never going to hit a home run, right? And whereas if you do the right multifamily project or you do the right industrial project, and the market's been off for a lot of my peers for a couple of years here, but when the market's in a better condition, those guys can hit triples and home runs and grand slams all day long, and good for them, right? And it's great. One of the other drawbacks I think that exists in the single tenant world is just due to the nature of the way these leases work on these restaurants, most of the operators want to fix the increases in the lease at 10% every 5. And our office and a handful of others that we work with are really pushing to move this to 12.5 and 15% every 5. And it's being met with just severe resistance. And the flip side of that is if you look over a 20-year primary term and 4 or 5-year options over 40 years, I mean, there's just not a chance in this world we're going to keep up with what real rent inflation is. It's just, It's not happening.
I was just going to say, I mean, I know like the operators are getting just hit from all angles right now. Sounds like the same for you, right? Interest on one side and then construction costs or the materials costs for you on the other. So it's all, I mean, this is a big part of, right, why there's this collapse, so to speak, of fast food right now. I mean, it's just for so many brands that haven't stayed relevant, maybe they're decaying. I think I've seen a lot of Burger King operators go out of business and Popeyes, and we're not talking like onesie twosies, like big operators who they can't operate anymore.
If you rewind the clock 4 or 5 years ago and you look at everything that it took to build a building out of the ground, and then you think of all the horizontal things, right? So think of the horizontal thing. You got asphalt, you got concrete, sidewalks, curb gutters, getting utilities to the site, getting sewer out, water in, gas in, electric in. And you take all that, the vertical cost always exceeded the horizontal cost. And then starting about 4 or 5 years ago, and this is mostly due to labor being so much more expensive, the vertical costs all of a sudden were at or higher than the vertical costs in most developments. And that continues today, right now. So we continue to spend more money typically on the horizontal costs than we do on the verticals.
Is this part of why some restaurants or fast food restaurants in general, there's a lot of people who lost their soul, lost their personality? If you think about like the typical 90s McDonald's or Pizza, it's like big plots of land, they're building play places, there's a big red roof on a Pizza Hut. And today it's the depressing just box. It's literally just a box with a sign. It's built for takeout and drive-through. And it just feels soulless. I believe DoorDash and the delivery apps played a massive role in that because you don't need all this space because no one's going to fill it, actually. But I'm curious for your take on that.
Obviously, McDonald's Playland used to be the place to go, right? Clearly, right? And I still think they need to bring Grimace back and some of these characters. I mean, I think that stuff would just go wild with consumers, right? But it would be interesting to hear like a personal injury lawyer's take on it. You think back to those Playlands of the world. I mean, I'm sure that has got to be a legal mess, right? And I'm sure over time there has to have been a lot of lawsuits attached to that. I just think of like some of these ADA attorneys that chase some of our projects, and ADA attorney calls you, and depending on the state that you're operating in, you basically just go get with your insurance company and cut them a check just to go away. And it's hush money, right? But it's a gross tactic, but it happens every day on properties all over the entire country. And it just dumb, frivolous little things, right? I mean, they'll go in and see and I'm not advocating that anybody should have an unsafe property or something, but I just think the legal side of things probably had something to do with that. But I would contend like the brands that have a soul, the brands that have some pizzazz, are absolutely on fire and crushing it. Those are the ones that are putting out the top volume, right? And you can see it clear as day. I mean, walk into a Raising Cane's in New York City and argue me for 5 minutes that you're not in a nightclub. right? Like
Yeah.
what they have done in New York City is the wildest, craziest, coolest thing. It's so unbelievable. And so whether it's that or you walk into an In-N-Out, anywhere you go to In-N-Out, and that now spans all the way from Washington all the way down to SoCal, into Texas, soon into Tennessee. It's a big geography. And you walk into an In-N-Out, you're going to have the same experience any store you go to. And you're going to be sitting next to a plumber, and you're going to be sitting next to a billionaire. They all eat there. And that place is crazy, right? And look at the volumes that it's doing. You know, you go into a Chick-fil-A, you're going to have the same exact dialed customer service recipe everywhere you go.
Yeah.
So it is unfortunate that a lot of them have kind of gone soulless, but like I would contend those that are not are standing out in a unique way. And I think they're getting rewarded for it.
Absolutely. There's probably like the brands that are doing things right are almost getting an outsized return because there's so many brands that are struggling. One of these brands that I think has great energy, and you post about them all the time, Dutch Bros. I want to talk about Dutch Bros and then also this broader beverage / drive-through coffee movement because it's just on fire right now. What about Dutch Bros specifically, man, do you think makes it work so well? Because their growth, their four-wall economics are just off the charts.
So I developed my first Dutch Bros in 2014 in Nampa, Idaho. And I can't remember exactly, but we were like in between store 90 and 100. So that was, that many stores in the chain at the time. And the store we were developing was the fourth for this particular franchisee. And their 3 other stores were all in the top 10 for sales for Dutch at the time. And so we opened store 4 for them. And I just remember, it's just this young couple that was the franchisee, the tenant, right, that we were signing this lease with. And I'm just kind of looking at them, and they're like in their mid-20s and talking about the wakeboard boats and big trucks. And I'm just kind of looking at these folks, and I'm like, looking at the numbers that they're putting up, and I'm like, you guys are just making a lot of money, right? This is clearly a very good operation for you all. And so I was mostly trying to figure out, is this sustainable, right? Can this continue onward? And there's good margin in coffee, right? Think about it. You're selling water and with a little bit of flavoring in it, right? And yeah, there's some syrups in there and some of those other things and the energy drinks. Back then they were still buying the Red Bulls. And so some costs there, but plenty of lift, right? And so that was when I really fell in love with the brand. It was right out of the gate. And we did that first one. It was a smaller store at the time. It was a 500 square foot store. And I believe it opened year 1 in volume at $2 million. And I just sat there looking at it. We sold it. We had a very nice exit on that deal. Cap rates had compressed during the time we were under construction, so we sold it for a little bit more money than we thought we were going to. And I looked at how much money we had made on the deal, and I looked back at where I thought the operator was doing in profit, and I realized that in their year 1, they probably made twice as much money as I did.
In 1 year?
Yeah. And I just sat there looking at it, and I was like, huh. Boy, that's pretty interesting because I've sold it. I'm on to the next thing, right? I've already paid, I'm getting schwacked with short-term cap gains tax, and meanwhile, they're getting all this depreciation against their equipment they just put in there. And maybe it wasn't a full shelter or whatever, but like, it's not a bad gig for them, right? As far as what they got out of it. And it was interesting because we just continued onward in the Dutch world and figured out that they had a really good culture. They had great leadership from the top down. I think Trav and the people that he had originally put into various management positions at the time were just on fire, and the brand was growing. They were still franchising, and I think it just had so much going for it. And I think right now, if you listen in on the earnings calls, they're at a super critical point right now because they're right there at 1,000 stores, and it wasn't the last earnings call. It was 2 calls ago. They talked about have developed 270 potential store managers, it's people who can open new stores that are sitting there trained inside of the system. They have 270 of them ready to go right now today. Imagine running a company where you have developed 270 future rock stars and they're sitting there ready to roll. And meanwhile, you're opening stores at a pace of 160 to 180. You can't even quite keep up with the talent that you're creating. What a good problem to have, right? I mean, excellent.
Yeah, champagne problems. But I mean, the culture is just something in general I've noticed with these drive-through coffee spots. And I got to imagine it started with Dutch Bros. But like even like the more emerging ones, like a Cali Coffee, they try to have that vibe where it's like the employees are super happy, and it's just like a really positive experience. And it's so different than, I mean, look, I got the Dunkin' book behind me. I love Dunkin'. I have it. That's my coffee of choice. I'm in the Northeast, but you're not getting like high fives and stuff when you pick up your coffee. So yeah, it's just interesting why this like drive-through model has been paired with, I'd say, above average hospitality in today's
Yeah.
era.
It is fascinating. You think about it from a consumer standpoint, and what's so interesting to me, and being the drive-through guy, you might imagine the NIMBYs like to, and the bike riders and the urbanists really like to attack me on Twitter, which is fun because I just always like to remind everybody, for every one screaming, yelling urbanist, there are 500 suburban soccer moms and dads, people that live in the burbs, live in an apartment, but still all drive a car. And they all like to go through the drive-through, except for they just don't scream and yell, and so you don't hear from them, right?
Yeah.
So clearly America was interested in drive-throughs, obviously. Like, this is not, at this point, I think we can clearly state, I think there's 16 or 17,000 Starbucks in the U.S. at the moment. And so figure about 14,000 of those probably have a drive-through. And so we've got 1,000 Dutch Bros. We've got 507 brews. We've got, just call it 200, another 400 scooters, and figure there's another 200 or 300 independents. Take the Clutch Coffees, the 151s, the Calis, Gravity, etc. Add all those together. There's 2,200 stores, right? There's probably, so what is that, 15, 18% of the Starbucks drive-through inventory now exists with drive-through only coffee stores. 20% of the inventory. This is working. This is not like a merger. This is a trend. The market has shifted decidedly, and it is gone. The U.S. consumer in coffee has gone to a drive-through only model, and they're accepting it. And in the meantime, we are watching Starbucks at scale fail on the cafe model, which is really unfortunate, because I think in my heart of hearts, and maybe you feel this way too, Patrick, but like, I don't mind going in and having a coffee experience. And 100%. I don't mind meeting somebody for a coffee.
It's great. It's actually, I was in Sweden. They have a word just for that. It's called fika. It's like you get a pastry, get a coffee, you hang out, and you converse with someone in the morning. But yeah. I don't mind it at all.
As many of these drive-through onlys as we build, it's great. And obviously we're giving customers what they want, because not only are they building all these operators building them at serious scale, they're building them at some of the most rapid paces we've ever watched coffee expand in the entire country ever. And then on top of that, they're pushing the average unit volume higher than we've ever seen too. And so America is clearly telling, the American consumer is telling us where we're headed, decidedly. And so it's interesting. What I think is amazingly cool is, to your point, almost every one of these operators has the same Chick-fil-A style mentality of hospitality. It's almost like they're serving the hospitality first, and then the coffee is just an energy drinks or an afterthought.
Do you think, because Starbucks CEO recently came out, I think this was in regards to a question about Luckin Coffee, they're now on U.S. soil after absolutely surpassing Starbucks back in China, known for takeout only, tech forward approach. And Starbucks has said, we're actually going the opposite direction. We're doubling down on our cafe style, like let's connect with the customer vibe. From what you're seeing, sounds like they're going against the drive-through model, which is, there's hospitality involved in customer connection, but it's definitely not, focusing on bringing people in the store by any means.
Yeah, and it is interesting what they have created, right? I mean, let's go back to Dunkin' for a minute, right? With all the Dunkin' locations you have in your backyard in the Northeast, I don't see people hanging out at a Dunkin' as much as they do at a Starbucks.
Definitely not.
And so it's really interesting. I think it's a cool trend to watch them do that. It's going to be, I'm wishing them nothing but luck, right? I hope they can figure it out and dial it in, because I think it's important. I think it's important for us to have spaces like that where we as a community can go meet and get together and grab a pastry and grab a drink and hang out. It's where kids go after school and get a refresher or whatever it is, right? And so it's important. Those are important places to go and important parts of our community. It would be sad if we didn't have stuff like that. And so I think it's great to watch that. I think it's been an interesting trend to watch how fast these drive-through onlys have come into the world. They have literally they've come into the U.S. like almost overnight, right? All inside the last decade. All the store growth has occurred in that time period. And it's like they have come to play ball.
Yeah.
Very fascinating.
And I mean, Seven Brew really is talking about playing ball. You saw it on Twitter the other day, or X, whatever. Their growth is just off the charts. And when I saw them that they sold 2,000 or so units, this 2 or 3 years ago, there was some big headline. I was like another franchise that's going to be in a bunch of litigation in a few years because they won't get those units open. But they're serious. They've grown by 2,100% over the last few years. What are they doing differently? Because you mentioned scooters before. There's other brands that have been, there's even Big B Coffee and some others out there. But Seven Brew they had that it factor and they never lost momentum. And then they got the Blackstone investment. And now they have guys like Tom Cook and big time franchisees building units fast. So is there something that they're doing different than the rest? And by the rest, I mean everyone except Dutch Bros.
Yeah. First off, how about the volumes on these units, right?
Yeah.
I mean, our last reported volume is from their 2024 data set in the FDD. So it's 2.04 in there, right? Versus 2.06 on the last Dutch Bros earning call. But when you start talking to the franchisees in the Seven Brew system and ask them what's happening, everybody keeps telling you the same thing: 2.5, 2.6, 2.7. It's certainly likely that we see the FDD get updated and be in a much higher range, right, on sales, which is going to be fascinating because those numbers are uncharted territory. We've never been in that range, right, knocking on 3 million. So that could be pretty interesting to watch what happens. I've been hearing wildly big numbers out of the Chicagoland franchisee, which is really interesting because take all the drive-thru only coffee and it's all focused in the warm weather states because they all figured that they were doing so much frozen and blended beverage business that they couldn't make it in the cold weather state. But you're hearing these Seven Brew numbers come out of Chicagoland and they're the highest in the entire system. And you're like, what's the deal there? What have they figured out, right? And I don't know. I'm not sure. I experienced it for the first time ever as a customer this week. I thought the cold brew was good. I got a cold brew and then I got an energy drink just to try one. And the cold brew was delicious. It was very good. I do think their coffee was definitely on the better end for all these drive-through uses that I've been through. And I've been through almost all of them on a regular basis in my life. And I'm a cold brew snob, right? I would tell you their cold brew was solid. It was dialed in. Great, friendly customer greeting, easy store layout, easy store drive-through to figure out how to get in there. I don't know. I'm not sure what they're doing. I will tell you that you move a lot faster through that line than you do through some of their competitors.
Okay.
It half made me wonder if they potentially have a higher volume, if it's directly related to the fact they're just pushing people through the drive-through faster.
Yeah, that's critical. Because if you can't push volume through, people are going to see a big line and just drive right past you. Or they're going to get in line once and it's, oh, this is way too long. I'm not coming back. So the ops definitely have a kind of a first and second order impact there.
I like watching the 151 story. That's been entertaining watching that. And it's going to be fascinating to see if Mark, after founding Hollywood Video, can trap lightning in a bottle twice. I hope he can because it would just be so cool to hear all about that and watch that success story. Wish the Cali Coffee folks, a lot of luck. Clutch, Darren Spicer, founded Clutch out of the Carolinas. He's doing some big volume. He's got great comp store sales, and he's stuck with the corporate model to date. And so it'll be interesting to see how he continues his expansion. So it's fun watching a lot of these emerging concepts.
It is. And another emerging concept that's somewhat adjacent to all these is Swig. So
You hit my hometown now.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, Utah is just what a crazy place with the concepts coming out of there. But it's starting to work elsewhere. What's going on with Dirty Soda?
Yeah, should we let the record state that you just admitted that it's working elsewhere? Because we just tell every flipping naysayer in the world that keeps – anytime I mention anything about Swig, Fizz, any of these concepts, it'll never work outside the state of Utah. Yeah, well, hi. I hate to tell you, world – the highest volume soda concepts are not in the state of Utah. Swig is doing more volume with their out-of-state stores than they're doing in-state. So it's not a Mormon thing. It's not just a Utah thing. It's working. Yeah,
I was definitely one of the naysayers. And then we had Brian Figali, you may know on X as QSR guy. He talked about obviously Little Caesars on the show, but also talked about his concept Coco Playa, and he was shocked that his number one seller when he put it on the menu became dirty soda and like the energy drinks. So, and that's in San Diego, where I lived in San Diego for like 8 or 9 months, kind of during the COVID time frame, and definitely a pretty health conscious community. And I had my doubts that anyone would be buying soda in some of these like coastal cities where, for lack of a better way to say it, just superficiality kind of runs the show as far as like the way you look and the way you dress and all that. And yeah, it was a top seller. And then I started paying attention to you and read the Dutch Bros earnings reports and where most of their sales are coming from. And yeah, I mean, people are buying it. So I also think there's just, and this is coming from, I'm actually, another guest we're having on is one of the fund managers at Savory Fund who made their earliest investment. Obviously, you know this, I'm saying this for the audience, but made the earliest investment into Swig. Part of his thesis was just, look at Coca-Cola and Pepsi. People love soda. Those are big companies. This is just taking it and putting it into a 4-wall restaurant. And it's working. But I'd love to, what have you seen from just, one, do you work with Swig at all? And also, what have you seen from their growth? Because I think it was started back in 2010, but only in the last few years has it really come onto the scene nationally.
Yeah, there's about 25 soda companies in Utah. So Swig would be the most notable for sure. Fizz probably number 2. Our brokerage office has brokered over 65 soda transactions. And so we've definitely been involved with helping them open a handful of stores in their footprint. I've not built a Swig. We have done a couple of Fizzes in shopping centers that we had, put them on an end cap, give them a drive-through. But know a lot of the folks there, dealt with them for a long time. Great concept. It was interesting when they first opened about 12, 14 years ago, somewhere in there. They opened in Provo, which is kind of adjacent to BYU. And the school, most people out of state don't realize, which is the biggest in the state, is actually Utah Valley University, which is 2 miles straight west of BYU. And so you have our 2 biggest schools that are basically 2 miles apart from each other. And UVU originally started as it was the school that you would send your kids to if they couldn't get into BYU. And then it just took off and exploded from there. And so, you've got, 75,000 college students or something like that, right, between the 2 universities there. And so these first couple stores started opening in northern Utah. The original was down in St. George, but then they started opening store 2 and 3. And they started selling so much Coke and Pepsi that Coke and Pepsi started sending executives out to come look at the stores to figure out what was going on, right? In other words, what is happening and how are you selling this much of our product? And it just kind of took off from there. And then they added in the sugar cookies, which seemed like a totally logical fit as you're kind of getting your taste treat. And it's just gone. It's been a whole world of its own. And the one thing I like to remind people of when you look at the beverage space, whether it's a 7 Brew or Dutch, or you're looking at a Swig, is the market share they're going after here. They're just as busy at 2 to 4 p.m. as they are at 6 to 8 a.m. Right. So first off, you've got kind of 2 traffic patterns. And so that impacts everything. It impacts site selection, which side of the road you want to be on. You want to think about being close to a high school. You want to think about being close to some big drop-off facility like a regional park where comp sports might be going down, and you got moms with kids in the car that are driving by. Those are the kind of spots that tend to excel and do better. And the other thing to think about is as they're taking market share, it's not like they're just hitting Starbucks or the traditional coffee cafes. I think they're hitting McDonald's. I think they're hitting a gas station. I think they're hitting those folks as hard as they're hitting anybody and taking market share from them.
Yeah. Well, I think just the response even from not just McDonald's, but Taco Bell with their Live Más Cafe concept. And then, of course, McDonald's now folding Cosmics, but clearly rolling that out to the existing McDonald's footprint. They definitely took notice of this trend and don't want to be left behind with it. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out 5-10 years from now.
Yeah, but I mean, take a look at the McDonald's thing, right? McDonald's still has arguably the best Diet Coke blend in the fast food world, right? You go to any McDonald's anywhere, the Diet Coke basically tastes the same. And you look at that and you say, how much business have they stepped away from at 2 to 4 p.m. when you have a Swig or a Dutch or a 7 Brew, 200 yards away from their front door? It's got to be a fair amount.
100%. Especially they're just people, if that's what they want is that beverage, they're set up better than a McDonald's. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, I've seen Mick franchisees tweets and they have the equipment's ready. They're probably a drive-through location. So yeah, it's good. I don't know. I have a hard time betting against McDonald's.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying. I think it's interesting because I think in dealing with all these beverage concepts, the first thing you want to do is say, what are they doing to Starbucks? I think Starbucks is one of the places that they're taking sales. I think they're also taking sales from some of the traditional fast fooders. I think they're taking sales probably more so from the gas stations, though.
Totally. Yeah, it's not like kind of dipping into a bunch of different subsectors of this broader food and beverage category. Can we talk about Utah for a second?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned, right, there's like 20 or however many soda concepts.
Mm-hmm.
I know this goes beyond soda, but there's even tons of dessert concepts that come out of Utah. Is it the most competitive place for dessert it's definitely for soda, but yeah, is Utah the most competitive spot for dessert franchises as well?
I just think you could stop a competitive spot. It's a competitive spot, right? And so how and why, right? So when I started in the brokerage business, it was in 2002 while I was in college. Well, I had just finished a 2-year Mormon mission, right, for the Mormon church, where basically you are knocking doors, selling religion door to door, right? And a ton of our college students continue to do that to this day. An enormous chunk of the students choose to go out for the summertime, and to raise extra money, they'll go door to door selling alarm systems, pest control, solar, you name it, right? So what is ingrained in this society here is a very hardworking, very sales-oriented mindset. Because of that, we have loads of direct selling companies, MLMs historically is a reference. We've got a lot of others, just anything attached to sales tends to thrive here. And it's because our youth is energetic, they're educated, and they've got a hard work ethic and they want to sell. So translate that into every industry. But yes, as it relates to the food industry, we're a chain society here. Sadly, I think I would love to see a little bit more character and charm with some of the locals, but we don't have as much of that. We're starting to get more, which is lovely, but we're great at chains, right? Cafe Rio and Costa Vida are a great example of that, right? 2 Tex-Mex-based concepts, both headquartered, both started here. Head-to-head competitors. We had the cookie wars. Who could forget that? We have the soda wars, right? And that's just the way this environment is here. It's competitive.
It is just fascinating, though, with the cookie wars and the soda wars both coming out of Utah. It's certainly a good breeding ground for entrepreneurship. We had Crumble owners as the second guest on the Fran Dogs pod, and out of Utah, just absolute workhorses, man. And they credited a lot of their background from the Mormon missions and door-to-door sales as like where they kind of first found their hustle. So yeah, I don't know. I just think it's fascinating because I've never heard of a state that kind of has that culture to it.
It's nice running a number of different companies that we have here that are all attached to sales, right?
Yeah.
We've got a deep talent pool that we can hire from at any day of the week. And I don't say that in jest, right? Because you got to get the right person. But we've been really fortunate to have some unbelievable hires and team members that have onboarded with us. And it's been great. It's a great place to run some businesses from.
So back to your business, what's the hard part here? I guess it's getting the land, right? You're probably competing with other firms, but I'm just thinking, right, if people remembered back from the beginning of our conversation, to me, it still feels just such a no-brainer. It's okay, buy some land that's in a good spot, which in the Northeast, frankly, where I don't know where you'd even do that because everything feels like it's developed already. And some real estate firm probably owns every parcel of land already. And I'm gauging that purely off the franchisees who are like, we lease everything. We can never find our own real estate to own. But yeah, if someone does want to get in, like you got to raise money for the land. So are you constantly raising money for each acquisition, or do you get to a point where your rent is your cash flow is just funding the next acquisition of a parcel of land?
Yeah. So let's take that one at a time, right? So we generally equitize just deal by deal. We usually have more deals than we have equity to go into deals. It's also kind of an interesting dynamic because the more deals you do, the more your equity is just spread across more deals,
Yeah.
right? But the better, generally speaking, at least I've found, is the GPs that have more deals going, not less deals, are usually the best GPs. They usually have more experience, more knowledge, more relationships, more ability to figure out what to do if something goes wrong. They've got better teams generally. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic because it's really, if you're looking at it from an LP perspective, I think you're best benefited by a GP that's busy, right? That is very actively engaged, has got a lot going on. I think those are the ones historically, at least that I've seen, that usually produce the best returns. So we just equitize deal by deal. If we're raising money for Drive-Thru Coffee, it's really become quite easy for us to do that. We haven't had a hard time with that. We are working on a larger project here where it would be a lot of Drive-Thru Coffee. And so it'll be interesting to see if we can get through that raise okay. But that's what we do. With respect to where is it hard, it's easy. It's hard to open a top 25% store.
Yeah.
There were 12 In-N-Outs open before our In-N-Out opened. Ours has not been open for a year, but it appears to me that in the first year, our In-N-Out will be the number one In-N-Out in the state. It's hard to open that, right? Because anybody can open the 13th on the row in sales, the last one.
Yeah.
But can you open the best one? Right? And where are those best units? And what are the dynamics that go into the best units? And that's a lot of the reason I started the Dirt Dog Pod is the entire purpose of what I do on our podcast is just interview retailers. And it's talk to me about how you find the best site and what happens. And also, what do you order at Olive Garden when you're sitting at the bar in Toledo, Ohio by yourself and you don't want to make eye contact with anyone because you're eating by yourself for the third night in a row? What's your order? And then what do you do to make sure nobody talks to you?
That's what I should have asked you about in minute one of this podcast, man.
Yeah.
You do bring up a good point, though. For franchisees, you said it before at the In-N-Out, it's difficult to open one of the top stores. I mean, what should your typical franchise operator be thinking about when they're looking to pick their site? And then also I've heard some operators, they shy away from a drive-through. They'd rather do an inline, and it's purely off of cost. They're just thinking drive-throughs are going to cost me a lot more money to build. I'd rather be an efficient, smaller footprint. But as we've seen, the numbers that you can put through a drive-through are far and away what you're ever going to do in an inline location. So
not addressing the drive-through versus non-drive-through, because some of these concepts have kind of vacillated back and forth, right? Like what's better? A lot of them are like pickup windows really versus an actual drive-through.
Sure.
But just looking purely at some of the biggest mistakes that I watch operators make is talking to their broker, where can I buy a site in this trade area? Right there. If that is your motivation, I guarantee you are not likely to ever find the best site. Period. End of story. You're going to be pad 30. You're going to be pad 15 off the corner. You're always going to be behind the Advanced Auto Parts, right? You're just always going to be in the wrong spot. Restart the dialogue and say, give me the number one site in the entire trade area. And here's what's interesting. Sometimes the brokers know what those areas are, and sometimes they're not as good at fast food. And so sometimes they're not going to know, but what it's going to take is a little bit of a collaborative effort between you and the broker to pin down where that is, right? Why is this the number one trade area? And I would tell you, in today's world, we've got so much data available at our fingertips right now. I can go into my system and turn Placer or restaurant trends on nationally, and I can, in 5 minutes, basically dial in what's happening from a fast food perspective at any intersection ever. And that's good. Now, that's what allows me to weed anything out on my tour that I don't want to look at. But then I need to get down there and I need to drive it. And I need to drive it from every single different direction, each intersection. And then I need to park my car and get out of my car and go talk to everybody. I'm talking, if there's a Walgreens there, talk to the Walgreens manager. If there's a grocery store behind a Kroger, go talk to the Kroger manager. How you doing? What's going on? I heard this store was number 3. By the way, if you ever want to get a volume out of a grocery operator, like a manager, that's what you walk in. It's be like, hey, there's 50 stores in the DMA, right? I heard this is the third best. They'll tell you right there if it's the third best or not because they're bragging. So that's the way you get volumes, right? Is you just go talk to people. And then you go talk to the McDonald's operator and be like, hey, I was thinking about putting a Wendy's here. Do you think that Wendy's would do well here? Go right into your competitor and just ask them. Like those people are, how long you been managing a store? 9 years. Should I put a Wendy's here? I mean, you could, but have you looked at the traffic pattern? It doesn't go that way. All of the afternoon traffic pattern is the other way. You're on the wrong side of the road. They'll tell you stuff like that. Everybody's nice in the world generally, right? People are collaborative. They want to be good people. And so just go ask, right? And so by the time you get done asking, you're going to quickly dial yourself in to say, is this good, bad, or indifferent, right? Is this the right site for me? Is this a top site for me? Another totally helpful exercise, if an operator has been in their market for a long time but hasn't really grown, go through and create like a 2 or 3 page grading system and grade the exterior presentation of the store, the signage, the drive-through signage, the interior condition. Are the seats old? Do you have benches that are cracked? Do you have tile that's cracked? Does it need to be painted, right? All these things and all these criteria. Rank the bathrooms. Are the fixtures updated? Does it need to be updated? Were they clean when you walked in? And then spend 3 or 4 days and go drive every single one of your restaurants and then drive all of your competitors' restaurants and go look at what their offering is. You will quickly see, it will take you, that is the probably single greatest way to analyze any market ever. I will never forget when my friends bought they had 13 or 14 Wendy's in Boise when they bought the market. And the first thing we had to do is figure out which stores we should go put that 500 to 900,000 in to go do the image activation update with the blade. And so how do you decide where to put that money, right? How do you decide which ones are first? The easiest way we did it, on Wendy's corporate suggestion, is we all got in a minivan. I rode in the back of the minivan for 4 days, and we graded every single property in the entire market. Nothing will tell you more about what's happening in the market than that. And you instantly could see, and it wasn't just like you're seeing where to put the money. You're also seeing if we can put this sign right here, it'll be in front of the Jack in the Box. And now we've outpositioned and we've put the sign on the road closer to the customer than the Jack in the Box sign. And now we know with this product we can beat Jack. We might drive another 3% or 4% to that store over the next month. Just random things.
I love it. I wish I asked you about this earlier in the episode because that's some good tactics, man. I think a lot of people just, especially the first-time owners, they just kind of let the broker, if the franchisor is not helping them, they're going to get taken for a ride by the broker unless they have some good outside help through some lucky connection. But a lot of times people make the expensive mistakes on the locations and or they're over-reliant on a placer and versus combining that with actually going and doing the in-person market research that you suggested. So that's
I can't say it enough. Get out of the car and walk around the site.
Yeah.
That will tell you. If you get out of the car and start walking around the site and it's got a stabby vibe, probably not your spot to have a business where you have a bunch of 20-year-olds or 18-year-olds working for you, right?
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been great to get you on. Where can people who, if they're operators looking for sites or they just want to follow along your journey personally, and everyone, I would recommend following Chris LinkedIn and X because he said it earlier. He's in love with drive-thrus. This man loves his drive-thrus. You can feel the energy every day. So
it's a weird illness.
Yeah.
I've almost got to the point if you just search dirt dogs anywhere, you pretty much find me within at least a few of the queries that come back. But
that's good branding, man.
Yeah. So, but you can do that. Dirt Dog Pod, of course, or Forza commercial, right? You can generally find me anywhere. So. But if you got a drive-through project you need some help with, happy to take a look with you. And if you're an operator, get out of the car when you're looking at the site. Get out of the car.
Yeah, that's the takeaway. Get out of the car, folks. All right. Well, thanks again, man. And that's a pod.